I dragged my duffel bag up the stairs, desperate for my first sleep in 18 months. But my father and brothers stood on the porch, holding beers like it was a party. Dad looked me dead in the eye and said I was homeless. I didn't scream, I just smiled. When they asked what was so funny, I told them the truth. That house they thought they sold was actually the one thing they never understood. My name is Madeline Lee. I am 31 years old, a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, and until about 10 minutes ago, I thought I was standing on firm ground. The cab driver had let me out at the curb, taking his tip with a nod that was more sympathetic than grateful. He had seen the way I looked at the house as we pulled up. It was a look of desperate, exhaustion-fueled longing. I had been awake for nearly 24 hours, navigating the logistical nightmare of military transport from Okinawa to Seattle, then a commercial flight to Nashville, and finally the long, winding drive into the humid heart of Pine Hollow, Tennessee. I gripped the handle of my green duffel bag. It was heavy, packed tight with the few personal belongings I had not put into storage, but the weight felt good. It felt real. It was the only thing anchoring me to the earth as I stared up at the structure I had called home for the last 5 years. The house was a modest 2-story Victorian with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch that always seemed to catch the best of the evening breeze. I had bought it with my re-enlistment bonus and a loan that took me 6 months of paperwork to secure. It was mine. Every creaky floorboard, every drafty window, every square inch of that overgrown lawn was mine. It was the one place in the world where I did not have to salute, where I did not have to inspect a uniform, and where I could just be Madeline. But as I dragged my bag up the concrete path, the gravel crunching under my boots, the picture did not look right. The front door was not just closed, it looked barred. The curtains were drawn tight, which was strange for a humid Tuesday afternoon, but the real anomaly was the welcoming committee. My father, Dale Lee, was leaning against the porch railing. He was wearing his favorite faded trucker's cap and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His arms were crossed over his chest, a defensive posture I recognized from 1,000 bad childhood memories. Beside him, sitting on the top step with his legs sprawled out as if he owned the place, was my younger brother, Trent. Trent was holding a sweating can of cheap domestic beer. He looked up as I approached, a smirk playing on his lips that made my stomach turn. He looked like the cat that had not only eaten the canary, but had also sold the birdcage for scrap metal. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and impending disaster. I stopped at the bottom of the steps, the duffel bag thumping against my calf. "Hey, Dad," I said, my voice rasping slightly from the dry, recycled air of the airplanes. I did not expect a party. Dale did not smile. He did not move to hug me. He did not even uncross his arms. He just stared at me with a look that combined pity with a strange, hard resolve. "Hey, Maddie," Trent chimed in, taking a loud slurp of his beer. "Welcome back to the good old U.S. of A." I ignored Trent. I kept my eyes on our father. Something was wrong. My internal radar, honed by years of assessing threats in foreign environments, was screaming at me. The atmosphere was too staged. They were waiting for me. This was an ambush. "Where are my keys?" I asked, reaching into my pocket out of habit, even though I knew I had left my spare set with Dale for emergencies. Dale shifted his weight. He looked at Trent, then back at me. He cleared his throat, a sound that was more of a growl. "You do not need keys, Madeline." I frowned, stepping up onto the first wooden step. The wood groaned under my boot. "What are you talking about? I am tired." "Dad, I just want to go inside, take a shower, and sleep for 12 hours. Move." "I am serious," Dale said, his voice flat. He finally dropped his arms, but only to gesture vaguely at the property around us. "You do not live here anymore." I froze. My hand tightened on the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the house, then back at him. I tried to process the words, but they refused to compute. "I paid the mortgage last week," I said slowly, articulating every syllable. "I have the bank notification on my phone." "Yeah," About that. Trent chuckled, crushing the empty beer can in his hand. Banks are slow. Paperwork takes time to clear. But the deed, that is done. Dale took a step forward, blocking my path to the door. Listen to me. Madeline, you are homeless. The words hung in the humid air like a physical blow. You are homeless. I did not scream. I did not drop my bag. I did not burst into tears. My training took over. In the Corps, when you are hit, you do not panic. You assess the damage, you identify the enemy, and you execute a countermeasure. I stood perfectly still. My eyes scanned their faces. Dale looked defiant. Chin jutted out. The look of a man who had convinced himself he was doing the righteous thing. Trent looked giddy, like this was all a hilarious prank or a lucky break at the blackjack table. You sold my house, I stated. It was not a question. We had to, Dale said, his voice rising, gaining the momentum of a rehearsed speech. You do not know what has been happening here. Madeline, you have been off playing soldier on a tropical island while we have been drowning, playing soldier. The insult bounced off my armor without leaving a scratch. Trent got into some trouble, Dale continued, gesturing to my brother, who tried to look solemn but failed miserably. Bad trouble. People were coming for him, Maddie, scary people. We needed liquid cash, and we needed it fast. So you sold my house, I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. It is just a building, Dale shouted, his face flushing red. Family is flesh and blood. Family makes sacrifices for family. That is what we do. You were not even using it. It was just sitting here, empty, while your brother was fearing for his life. Trent nodded vigorously. Dad saved my life, sis. You should be thanking him. He stepped up. He took charge. He used that power of attorney you left him, and he handled business, like a man. I looked at Trent. He was 28 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a toddler who had smashed a vase and blamed the wind. You used the power of attorney, I said softly. The power of attorney. I had signed 3 years ago, before my first deployment, a standard administrative measure. It was meant for handling mail, renewing vehicle registration, or dealing with minor repairs if a pipe burst. It was a tool for maintenance, not liquidation. It was legal. Trent sneered. Graham said it was watertight. Dad signed the papers. The money hit the account, and I paid off the sharks. Boom. Done. We even made a little profit on top. Dad is holding your cut. My cut. The phrase tasted like bile. Who is Graham, I asked. Graham Rusk, Dale said, puffing out his chest. A real estate professional. He understands how to move things quickly. He understood our emergency. He found a buyer in 2 days. Cash offer. No inspections. Closed in 4 days. 4 days. A house sale usually takes 30 to 45 days. To close in 4 days meant they had practically given it away. They had stripped my equity, my investment, my sanctuary, and fed it to whatever wolves Trent had invited to the door. I looked at the front door of my house again. I imagined strangers inside. I imagined my furniture being moved, my pictures being taken down, my life being erased. And then, a strange sensation washed over me. It started in my chest, a cold, hard knot that rapidly unraveled into something surprisingly light. I looked at Dale, sweating in his guilt and self-righteousness. I looked at Trent, basking in his unearned salvation. They thought they had won. They thought they had ambushed me, stripped me of my assets, and presented me with a fait accompli that I would have to accept because, after all, family is family. I looked at them, and I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not a nervous smile. It was the smile of a sniper who has just adjusted for windage and elevation and knows, with absolute mathematical certainty, that the target is already down before the trigger is even pulled. Dale flinched. He took a half step back. The defiance in his eyes flickered, replaced by a sudden, creeping unease. Trent's smirk vanished. He looked at Dad, then back at me. What Dale snapped, his voice cracking. What is that look? I didn't answer immediately. I reached into my pocket, but not for keys. I pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock it, I just held it in my hand, feeling the weight of the device. "You think I'm in shock," I said, my voice conversational, almost pleasant. "You think I am standing here trying to process how my father and brother could betray me so profoundly." I took a step up. Dale did not block me this time. He shrank against the railing. "You think you are the heroes of this story." I continued. "You think you made the hard choice to save the family. You think because you had a piece of paper that said, 'Power of Attorney,' you had the power of God." "Stop it," Dale whispered. "You are scaring me." "Madeline, stop smiling like that." "What are you laughing at?" Trent demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier bravado. "You are homeless. Remember, we have the money. It is over." I let out a short, sharp laugh. It echoed off the porch ceiling. "I am smiling," I said, leaning in close enough to smell the stale beer on Trent's breath. "Because you two idiots are celebrating a victory in a war you do not even know you have already lost." I looked at the house one last time. It looked peaceful, deceptive. "I am smiling," I whispered, "because the house you two just sold, the one you signed over to strangers. The house you took money for, that house is not what you think it is." Dale stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, turning my back on them and walking down the steps, picking up my duffel bag with a fluid motion, "that you did not sell my house. You sold your own funeral plots." "Where are you going?" Dale shouted as I reached the sidewalk. "Maddie, come back here." "You do not have anywhere to go." I did not look back. I did not stop. I walked toward the main road, the wheels of my bag humming on the asphalt. They were right about one thing. I was technically homeless, but I wasn't helpless. To understand why Dale and Trent were already doomed, and why that smile was the only appropriate reaction to their betrayal. "I have to take you back. Not far. Just 3 months. Back to a humid night in Okinawa, to a cramped barracks room, and to a single email notification that caused the floor to drop out from under my world. That was the moment the war really started. They just didn't hear the shot. The air in Okinawa does not feel like air. It feels like hot soup. It is a thick, humid blanket that clings to your skin the moment you step outside the air-conditioned barracks. A constant reminder that you are on a subtropical island thousands of miles away from the crisp, cool evenings of Tennessee. For the last 3 months, my life had been a rhythmic cycle of sweat, discipline, and exhaustion. I was a staff sergeant, and that meant my days were consumed by the needs of my Marines, the endless logistics of unit readiness, and the physical demands of maintaining a combat fitness standard that did not care if you had slept 4 hours or 8. I spent my days shouting over the roar of engines, and my nights staring at the ceiling of a room that smelled of industrial cleaner and boot polish. To keep myself grounded, I had a ritual every Tuesday and Friday evening, which was early morning back in Pine Hollow. I would call home. These calls were my anchor. They were the invisible tether connecting me to the world I was fighting to protect, and more specifically, to the white Victorian house with the wraparound porch. I would close my eyes while holding the phone, listening to my father complain about the local football team or the price of gas, and I would mentally walk through my house. I would imagine the sunlight hitting the dust motes in the hallway. I would picture the way the third step on the staircase creaked. It was a meditation. It was how I remembered who I was when I was not wearing a uniform. But as the weeks dragged on, the tether began to fray. It started subtly. Dale, a man who usually loved to talk for 40 minutes about the neighbor's lawn maintenance habits, began cutting our calls short. He sounded breathless, distracted. There was a nervous energy in his voice that I had not heard since Mom died 10 years ago. "I gotta go. Maddie, someone is at the door," he would say, hanging up before I could even say goodbye. Or, "I cannot talk right now. I am fixing the sink." Then came the background noises. During a call in late August, I heard voices in the background. Loud, aggressive voices, men's voices. "Who is that, Dad?" I had asked, sitting up on my bunk, my grip on the phone tightening. Nobody. Just the TV. He had lied. I knew the sound of his television. It was a tinny, old set. These voices had depth. They were in the room. Then, the specific nature of the questions changed. Instead of asking how I was, or when I was coming home, Dale started asking about logistics. "When does the direct deposit hit this month?" he asked once. "Are you getting that hazardous duty pay for this rotation?" he asked another time. I brushed it off at first. Dale worried about money. That was his nature. He was a retired factory worker living on a pension that never seemed to stretch far enough. I told myself he was just being a dad, worrying if his daughter was financially secure. But then, the bomb dropped. It was a Tuesday in September. The connection was fuzzy, but I heard him clearly enough. "Trent is staying here for a bit," Dale said, his voice dropping to a murmur, as if he did not want the walls to hear. My stomach turned over. Trent, my brother, was not evil, but he was a Category 5 hurricane of bad decisions. Trent did not just have bad luck. He manufactured it. He had a gambling problem that he called an investment strategy and a history of borrowing money that vanished into black holes. If Trent was staying for a bit, it meant he had burned every other bridge in a 50-mile radius. It meant he was hiding. "Dad, listen to me," I said, my voice switching from daughter to sergeant. "Do not give him money. Do not sign anything for him. If he is in trouble, tell him to call me. He is fine." "Maddie," Dale snapped, defensive now. "He is your brother. He just needs to get back on his feet. The family helps family. That phrase, family helps family." It was the weapon Dale used to silence all logic. I hung up that night with a feeling of dread that I could not shake. I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the dehumidifier, and my mind drifted to a document stored in a fireproof box in Dale's study. The power of attorney. I had signed it 3 years ago, right before my first long deployment. It was a standard precaution. The JAG officer at the time had recommended it. You need someone to handle your affairs if you are in a coma, or if a pipe bursts and the insurance company needs a signature. He had said. I had trusted Dale. He was my dad. He was stubborn and sometimes foolish, but he was honest. I had explicitly told him, "This is for emergencies. This is for maintenance." I never imagined that the emergency would be Trent, and the maintenance would be the demolition of my life. The silence from home grew heavier after that call. I texted. I called. No answer. Just the hollow ringing that eventually clicked over to a voicemail box that was full. Then came the text message. It was 3 days before I was scheduled to rotate back to the States. I was packing my gear, feeling that mix of exhaustion and adrenaline that comes with going home. My phone buzzed on the metal desk. It was from Dale. No hello, no safe travels, just 6 words. Call me before you come back. I stared at the screen. It was not a request. It was a warning. It read like a barrier being erected. Why would I need to call before I came back? I was coming home. I had a key. I tried to call him immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I called Trent. His phone was disconnected. That night, the humidity in Okinawa broke into a violent thunderstorm. Rain lashed against the barracks windows like gravel. I could not sleep. I sat at my small desk, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room. I was checking my personal email, clearing out junk, preparing for the digital silence of the flight home. And there it was. It was stuck between a promotional email for protein powder and a newsletter from a veterans association. A generic, automated subject line that I almost deleted without thinking. Property activity notice. Pine Hollow. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened the email. It was from a third-party title monitoring service I had signed up for years ago and completely forgotten about. It was a free service, usually just sending spam about refinancing rates, but this was not spam. Alert title transfer, pending. Property address, 402, Maple Street, Pine Hollow, TN, status processing, grantor Madeline Lee. By attorney-in-fact, grantee Aaron Caldwell, and the rest of the grantee's name was cut off by the preview limit. I sat there, frozen. The rain pounded outside, but the room went silent. By attorney-in-fact, that meant the power of attorney. I read the email again, and again. Processing, pending, that meant it was happening right now. While I was sitting here in uniform, 7,000 miles away, someone was signing my name, Someone was selling the roof over my head. I did not scream. I did not throw the laptop. A cold, clinical clarity washed over me. This was an attack. I grabbed my phone and dialed Dale again. The phone rang and rang and rang. I could picture him sitting in the living room, watching the phone light up, and choosing not to answer. I could picture Trent standing over him, telling him to let it ring. I dialed Trent's number again, knowing it was dead, just to punish myself. I looked at the timestamp on the email. It was dated 2 days ago. In the world of real estate, 2 days is a lifetime, but processing meant the deed had not been recorded yet, or maybe it had, and the system was lagging. I needed eyes on the target. I checked the time. It was 8 in the morning in Okinawa. That meant the legal assistance office on base would be opening in 10 minutes. I did not wait. I threw on my uniform. I did not bother with perfect grooming standards. I laced my boots with a speed that came from muscle memory and rage. I marched across the base. The rain soaked me instantly, plastering my shirt to my skin. But I did not feel it. I walked past the mess hall where Marines were eating breakfast. I walked past the parade deck. I walked straight to the nondescript beige building that housed the base legal services. I was the first person through the door. A young corporal at the front desk looked up, startled by my wet appearance and the intensity in my eyes. "I need to speak to a legal assistance attorney." I said, "Now. Do you have an appointment?" "Staff sergeant?" he asked, reaching for a clipboard. "I do not have an appointment," I said, leaning over the counter. "I have a felony in progress." 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a small, windowless office across from a civilian attorney named Mr. Henderson. He was a tired-looking man with coffee stains on his tie. But he listened. I laid it out for him. The power of attorney, the text message, the email, the silence. He looked at the printout of the email I had handed him. He adjusted his glasses. He tapped a pen against his desk. "You signed a general durable power of attorney?" he asked. "Yes," I said, 3 years ago, for administrative maintenance. Mr. Henderson sighed. He leaned back in his chair. "Staff Sergeant, a general durable power of attorney is a blank check. If your father has that document, he can legally do almost anything you can do. He can access your bank accounts. He can take out loans in your name. And yes, he can sell real estate titled in your name." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So there is nothing I can do. It is legal, Mr. Henderson held up a hand. "On the surface, the act of selling might be legal because you gave him the authority." However, he leaned forward, his voice dropping, becoming sharper. "Fiduciary duty, that is the key phrase. An agent acting under a power of attorney has a legal obligation to act in the principal's best interest. That means your best interest, not his, and certainly not your brother's." He looked me dead in the eye. "If he is selling your primary residence while you are deployed, without your consent, and using the proceeds to pay off his debts or your brother's debts, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. That is fraud. That is theft." He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him and uncapped a pen. He looked at me with a gravity that chilled the room. "If we can prove that the money did not go to you, or to your benefit, then the transaction is tainted. But I need you to understand what you are starting here. Madeline." I looked at him. "What am I starting, Mr. Henderson stopped writing and looked up. "If this is a simple misunderstanding, we fix it. But if this is what it looks like, abuse of a power of attorney to liquidate the assets of a deployed service member, then you are not just filing a complaint against a bad real estate deal." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "You are initiating a criminal investigation. This stops being a family matter the moment we file the paperwork. You will be going to war with your father. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the text message. "Call me before you come back." I thought about Trent staying in the room I had painted. I thought about the house. I looked at Mr. Henderson. "They sold my home while I was serving my country," I said, my voice steady. "They declared war on me first. I am just returning fire." Mr. Henderson nodded once. "Then let's get to work." That was the moment I stopped being a daughter and started being a plaintiff. But even then, sitting in that office, I did not know the half of it. I did not know about Graham Rusk. I did not know about the fake notary. And I certainly did not know that the house itself held a secret that would turn their quick cash grab into a prison sentence. I walked out of that office with a plan. But first, I had to get home. I had to let them think they had gotten away with it. I had to let them smile on that porch. Because the most dangerous trap is the one you do not see until it snaps shut. Mr. Henderson had given me a weapon. But it was not a rifle. It was a checklist. He had leaned across his desk, his eyes magnified by his spectacles, and told me that anger was a luxury I could not afford. Anger makes mistakes. Anger tips your hand. If I wanted to stop what was happening, or at least survive it, I needed to turn myself into a bureaucratic machine. I had to become an auditor of my own betrayal. Go to the County Register of Deeds website, he had instructed, his voice low and clinical. Request everything. The deed. The closing disclosure, the wire instructions. Do not email your father. Do not text your brother. You are gathering intelligence. You do not engage the enemy until you have the map. I walked back to the barracks in the rain, my mind operating on a singular, cold frequency. I did not feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like a case officer building a dossier. The internet connection in the barracks was sluggish, struggling against the storm outside and the load of 1,000 Marines trying to stream movies. I sat at my desk, my wet uniform dripping onto the linoleum floor, and navigated the clunky interface of the Pine Hollow County Register of Deeds. I had to fill out request forms. I had to upload a scan of my military ID. I had to attach the original power of attorney document I had scanned years ago, proving I had standing to request the history. Every spinning loading icon felt like it took an hour. I submitted the request. Then, the waiting began. For the next 48 hours, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I went to PT. I shouted commands at my squad. I ate chow that tasted like cardboard, but my mind was entirely inside my laptop, waiting for a ping. I kept my phone off. I did not want to accidentally answer a call from Dale and let my voice betray me. I needed to know the extent of the damage before I spoke to him. On the third night, at 2 a.m, the email arrived. It was a large file. The subject line was simply, Records Request 2024 to 899. I opened it. It was a PDF, 50 pages thick. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face, and I began to read. It was like reading an autopsy report for a body that was still breathing. The first page was the warranty deed. There it was, in black and white, Grantor Madeline Lee. And below my name, in a handwriting I had known my entire life, the looped, shaky script of my father was the signature, Dale Lee, attorney in fact. I stared at that signature. I remembered him signing my report cards with that hand. I remembered him signing the permission slip for my first field trip. Now, he had signed away my sanctuary. I scrolled down. I looked at the dates. The timeline was terrifying. The listing agreement had been signed just 6 days prior to the sale. 6 days. In the real estate market of Pine Hollow, houses usually sat for weeks. This was not a sale. It was a liquidation. It was a fire sale. I saw the buyer's name again. Erin Caldwell. I did not know her, but the name that appeared on the transaction coordination documents, the name that appeared on the expedited service fee line, was the one Dale had mentioned, Graham Rusk. His name was everywhere. He was the listing agent. He was the transaction coordinator. There was even a document where he was listed as a consultant for the buyer. In a normal transaction, that is a conflict of interest so bright it burns your retinas. Here, it was just business. I kept scrolling, looking for the why. Why the rush? Why the secrecy? Then I found the closing disclosure. This is the document that breaks down the money. It shows where every cent goes. It shows the mortgage payoff, the taxes, the fees, and at the bottom, it shows the cash to seller. My mortgage balance was roughly $120,000. The house had sold for $200,000. It was under market value, but it still left a significant chunk of equity. Roughly $70,000 should have been sitting there, waiting for me. My eyes traced the line items. There was a wire transfer instruction, wire to account ending in 4492. I froze. I knew that account number. That was the joint checking account Dale used for household expenses. The account I sometimes transferred money into to help with bills. But there was a second line item, a disbursement to creditor, that took up the majority of the remaining cash. Payable to T. Lee Holdings, $40,000. I stopped breathing. T. Lee. Trent. My brother did not have a holding company. He did not have a business. He had a gambling addiction and a talent for debt. I looked at the numbers again. They had split my life up. Dale took a slice, presumably to cover his own debts or to feel like he had earned his commission for the betrayal. But the bulk of it, the equity I had sweated and bled for, had been funneled directly to Trent under the guise of a creditor payoff. They had laundered the sale of my home to pay off my brother's mistakes. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like hypothermia. They had not just sold a building, they had conspired. This was premeditated. The documents showed a flurry of activity emails regarding rushing the title, requests to waive the cooling-off period. They were terrified I would come home early. They were racing against my deployment schedule. I stood up and paced the small room. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to confirm it before I made my move. I could not call from my number. If Dale saw my name, he might not answer. Or he might have a script ready. I needed to catch him off balance. I walked down the hall to the common area where there was a payphone that nobody used anymore, but I didn't have coins. Instead, I went back to my room and downloaded a calling app that generated a random local number, a burner line. I dialed my father's landline. It was mid-afternoon in Tennessee. He would be sitting in his recliner, watching the game shows. The phone rang twice. "Hello?" Dale's voice was cheerful, relaxed. It was the voice of a man who had no cares in the world, a man who had just paid off his debts with someone else's money. I did not say anything for a moment. I just listened to the background noise, the familiar hum of the refrigerator, the sound of the TV, the sounds of my home. "Who is this?" Dale asked, sounding slightly annoyed but still casual. "Dad," I said. The silence on the other end was immediate. It was not a pause. It was a vacuum. I could hear his breath hitch. Maddie, his voice squeaked. He sounded like a child caught with his hand in the jar. "Why are you calling from this number? Is everything okay?" He was pretending. He was doing the concerned father routine. It made me want to vomit. "I am fine," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly level. "I am just doing a final check on my paperwork before I fly out." "Oh, right. Good." He cleared his throat. "When are you coming back exactly? Trent and I were thinking maybe we could pick you up." He wanted to control the arrival. He wanted to intercept me before I got to the house. I ignored the question. I looked at the PDF open on my screen. Glowing in the dark room, I looked at the signature on the deed. "Dad," I asked, dropping the pretense, "is there anything you want to tell me about what he asked?" His voice went up a pitch. It was the same tone he used when I was 10 and he broke my mother's favorite vase and blamed the cat. About the house. I said, another silence. This one was heavy, thick with panic. I could almost hear his brain spinning, trying to find a lie that would fit. "The house is fine. Maddie," he stammered, the roof is good. Trent mowed the lawn. Everything is waiting for you." Lies. Pure, unadulterated lies. He was standing in a house he had already sold, telling me it was waiting for me. He was gaslighting me from 7,000 miles away. I closed my eyes. That was it. That was the confirmation. There was no misunderstanding. There was no emergency he was trying to explain. There was only deceit. "Did you sell my house, Dad?" I asked. The question hung there. I waited. I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to have the courage to admit what he had done. But all I heard was breathing. Shallow, rapid breathing. I did not wait for him to construct an excuse. I did not wait for him to blame Trent, or the economy, or the pressure. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply pressed the red button on the screen. The call ended. I sat there for 1 minute, listening to the rain in Okinawa. The connection was broken. But the path was clear. I opened a new tab on my browser. I went to the airline website. My original flight was scheduled for 4 days from now. That was too long. That gave them time to move the money. That gave them time to disappear. I booked a new ticket, one way, departing in 6 hours. It cost me $1,000 in change fees, eating into the last of my savings. But I did not care. I did not send a text. I did not email. I wanted them to think they had weathered the storm. I wanted Dale to put the phone down and tell Trent. She suspects something, but she is still in Japan. We have time. I wanted them to relax. I wanted them to open those beers on the porch. I packed my bag. I folded my uniforms with precision. I took the file, the 50 pages of evidence, and I saved it to a thumb drive, then emailed a copy to Mr. Henderson and another copy to a cloud account they could never access. I was coming home. But I wasn't coming home to sleep. I walked out of the barracks and into the rainy night, dragging my bag behind me. The flight would be 14 hours of hell, but that was fine. I needed the time to memorize every name, every date, and every dollar amount on those documents. By the time I stepped onto that porch, I would not just be Madeline Lee, the daughter, I would be the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner of their little scheme. And they would not see me coming until my shadow fell over their celebration. The confrontation on the porch had reached a stalemate. I had dropped the bomb, you sold your own funeral plots, and walked away. But I hadn't gone far. I had just moved to the tactical position of the sidewalk, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between us. Dale was still clutching the railing, his face a mask of confusion and lingering defiance. Trent, however, had moved from smugness to aggression. He stood up, crushing his beer can. "You cannot just say that and walk off," Trent shouted, his voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. "You are just jealous because we made a smart move and you were not here to take the credit." I turned around slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The rage I felt was so condensed it felt heavy in my chest, like a lead vest. "Who notarized it?" I asked. The question caught them off guard. Trent blinked. "What? The deed?" I clarified, stepping back toward the bottom of the porch stairs, invading their space again. "A deed requires a notary public to witness the signature. Dad signed for me. Who witnessed it? Was it Mrs. Gable down at the bank? Was it the clerk at the post office?" Dale shifted his weight, looking at his shoes. "It was handled. It was part of the package." "Part of the package," I repeated. "A mobile notary." "Someone who came to the house. Graham took care of it." Trent snapped. "Why do you care about the paperwork? It is done. The money is in the bank. You're just trying to find problems because you are miserable." "Who is the legal representative?" I pressed. "Which title company held the escrow?" Dale waved a hand dismissively. "It was all streamlined. Graham said we didn't need to bloat the costs with a bunch of lawyers. It was a direct family-facilitated transfer. Very modern." My stomach churned. Direct family-facilitated transfer, that wasn't a legal term. That was gibberish designed to hide a crime, before I could tear that logic apart. The front door of the house, my front door opened. The sound of the latch clicking was like a gunshot. Dale jumped. Trent spun around. A woman stepped out. She looked to be about my age, maybe a few years older. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that said Nashville Music City. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she was holding a ceramic mug of tea. She looked tired, normal, and completely out of place in the middle of this family war zone. This was Erin Caldwell, the grantee. She looked at Dale, then at Trent, and finally her eyes landed on me. She saw the duffel bag. She saw the uniform boots I was still wearing. She saw the tension vibrating in the air. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Her voice hesitant. I heard shouting. Dale immediately put on a fake, jovial smile that was painful to watch. "Oh, hey Erin, no, everything is fine. Just a little family reunion. My daughter, Madeline. She just got back from overseas. She is a little overwrought. Jet lag. You know." He was trying to dismiss me. He was trying to paint me as the hysterical, emotional soldier who just needed a nap. I did not let him. I looked directly at Erin. I didn't glare. I didn't scowl. I looked at her with the professional appraisal of someone assessing a civilian in a combat zone. I am Madeline Lee. I said, my voice calm and clear. And I am the owner of this house. Erin's face paled. She tightened her grip on the mug. Excuse me, she said, looking back at Dale. You told me she knew. You said she was relocating permanently to Japan and wanted to liquidate. Dale laughed. A nervous, hacking sound. She is just having cold feet. Sentimental value. Right, sweetie? I stepped up onto the porch again. Dale tried to block me, but I moved around him with a fluid sidestep that left him stumbling. I stood 3 feet from Erin. I did not know this house was for sale until 3 days ago. I told her. I did not sign the deed. I did not authorize the sale. And I am certainly not relocating to Japan. Erin looked terrified. She looked from me to Dale, and the realization began to dawn on her. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't a shark. She was just a woman who thought she had bought a home. If we have the keys, she stammered. We moved in yesterday. My husband is at work. We paid cash. How long did the process take? I asked gently. Erin swallowed hard. 4 days. From the viewing to the closing. And who handled the paperwork, Mr. Rusk? Graham Rusk? I nodded. And did you have your own lawyer review the title? Did you have a real estate attorney look at the power of attorney document? Erin shook her head. Graham said it wasn't necessary. He said since it was an expedited family sale, bringing in lawyers would just slow down the emergency funding your father needed. He said he was doing us a favor by cutting out the closing costs. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. They had played her just as hard as they had played me. They used Dale's emergency to guilt her into rushing, and they used the cost-saving lie to keep her from getting legal advice. Listen to me, Erin, I said, lowering my voice so only she could hear, ignoring Trent's sputtered protests behind me. I am not here to throw your furniture on the street today. I am not here to scream at you. I reached into the side pocket of my duffel bag and pulled out a folded manila envelope. Inside were copies of the documents I had pulled from the registry, the fake timeline, the weird disbursement of funds, the irregularities Mr. Henderson had highlighted. I held it out to her. If this transaction has points of failure, and it has many, then you are not the owner. You are a victim of fraud. Just like me. She hesitated, then took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. What does this mean? She whispered. It means you need a lawyer. I said, not Graham Rusk. Not anyone Graham Rusk recommends. You need a real, independent real estate attorney. Tonight. Dale lunged forward. Do not listen to her. She is just trying to scare you. The deal is done. The papers are filed. I turned on my heel and faced my father and brother. The sympathy vanished. The cold rage returned. You think the papers are filed? I asked Dale. You think because you signed Dale Lee on a dotted line, it is over. It is over. Trent yelled. We have the money. You cannot undo it. I looked at Trent. He looked so pathetic in his triumph. He thought money was the only thing that mattered. He didn't understand the law. He didn't understand that a transaction built on fraud is not a transaction. It is a crime scene. But there was something else. Something Mr. Henderson had found at the very end of our meeting. A detail about the original deed from when I bought the house 5 years ago. A clause I had insisted on because I was young, single, and paranoid about liability. I looked at them both, then back at Erin, who was clutching the envelope like a shield. You are right about one thing. Dad, I said, you sold the house. You took the money. I picked up my bag. But you made a mistake. A big one. What mistake? Dale asked, his voice trembling. I smiled that same, unnerving smile. You checked the power of attorney. You checked the bank accounts. But you never checked the original title structure of this property. I leaned in, whispering the final blow. This house isn't just under my name, Dad. It is held in a living trust, the Madeline Lee Revocable Trust, and the power of attorney you have. It grants you authority over Madeline Lee, the individual. It does not grant you authority over the trust. Dale's eyes went wide. He didn't understand the legal nuance, but he understood the tone. You sold something you never had the keys to. I said, and that house it has been legally locked the entire time. I turned and walked down the steps, leaving them in stunned silence. Erin was dialing her phone before I even reached the street. Dale looked like he was about to faint. Trent just stood there, his mouth open, the crushed beer can dripping onto his shoe. I walked toward the motel on the edge of town. I had nowhere to sleep, but I had never felt more awake. The first shot had been fired. Now, I just had to watch them bleed. The Highwayman Motel was located 3 miles from the exit ramp of Interstate 40, wedged between a truck stop and a Waffle House that looked like it had survived a minor bombing campaign. The room cost $65 a night. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial lemon cleaner, a scent that was becoming depressingly familiar to me. I threw my duffel bag on the floor and cleared the small, circular table by the window. I did not turn on the television. I did not unpack my clothes. Instead, I unpacked the war. I laid out the documents I had printed at the base in Okinawa, arranging them in a chronological grid: the deed, the closing disclosure, the power of attorney. The emails, it was a paper map of my own destruction. My phone had been buzzing in my pocket for the last hour, vibrating against my thigh like a nervous tick. I finally sat down on the edge of the sagging mattress and checked the notifications. There were 4 missed calls from Dale, 3 from Trent, and 2 voicemails. I pressed play on the speakerphone, setting the device on the table amidst the paperwork. "Maddie, pick up the phone." Dale's voice crackled. He sounded breathless, his tone oscillating between anger and panic. "You cannot just say things like that to Erin and walk away. She is freaking out. She is threatening to call her bank. You are going to ruin us. Madeline, do you hear me? If this deal unwinds, the money is already committed. You need to come back here and sign a waiver or something. Just call me. We are family." Click. I stared at the phone. Not once did he ask where I was staying. Not once did he ask if I had eaten, or if I was safe, or how it felt to come home from a deployment to find strangers in my kitchen. His only concern was the money that was already committed. I played the next one. It was Trent. "You think you are so smart." Trent sneered. His voice slurred, likely from the beer he had been nursing on the porch. "The trust thing Graham says, it is a loophole. We can fix it. You are just trying to embarrass Dad. You are selfish. Maddie, always have been. You get the big military paycheck and you leave us here to rot. Call Dad back before he has a heart attack." I deleted the messages. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest, a void where my affection for them used to be. They were not my family anymore. They were hostile combatants. Then, a text message popped up. It was from a number I did not recognize, but the preview text made me sit up straighter. "It is Erin. Miles and I just left Avery Pike's office. He is a real estate litigator. He says if what you showed me is true, we are in serious trouble. We want to help. Tell us what you need." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Erin was not the enemy. She was the flank security. I typed back, "Do not sign anything Graham sends you. Do not talk to my father. I am filing a police report in the morning. I will need you to make a statement." Her reply was instant. "We are in." I slept for 4 hours. A fitful, shallow sleep, where I dreamt I was back in the barracks. But the walls were made of glass, and everyone outside was selling my furniture. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I walked into the Pine Hollow Police Precinct. It was a brick building that smelled of coffee and old paper. I approached the front desk and asked to speak to a detective regarding real estate fraud and grand larceny. The officer at the desk looked at my military ID, looked at my face, and buzzed me through. Detective Lena Hart was a woman who looked like she did not have time for nonsense. She was in her late 40s, with hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that scanned me with the precision of a laser reader. Her desk was a mountain of files, but she cleared a space when I sat down. "Start from the beginning," she said, clicking a pen. I laid it out. The deployment, the power of attorney meant for maintenance, the lack of communication, the sale, the diversion of funds to Trent, the trust issue. She took notes, her face impassive. It sounded like a civil dispute. The kind of messy family drama cops hate getting involved in. I could see it in her eyes. She was getting ready to tell me to get a lawyer and go to civil court. Then I played my ace. I was in Okinawa. Detective, I said, I was on active duty orders. This wasn't just a misuse of a document. They liquidated the primary residence of a deployed service member. Hart stopped writing. She looked up. You were deployed, she asked. Under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. Yes, I said. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The temperature dropped. The civil dispute label vanished, replaced by something much more serious. And who was the agent, she asked. Her voice sharper. Graham Rusk, I said. Hart's pen froze in midair. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. It wasn't a good kind of recognition. It was the look a cop gives when you mention a name they have written on a whiteboard too many times. Rusk, she muttered, almost to herself. You know him? I asked. Hart leaned back in her chair, tapping the pen against her chin. I have heard the name, she said carefully. We have had complaints, usually from the elderly, usually about fast cash offers that turn into nightmares, but nothing that ever stuck. He is good at staying in the gray areas. He uses third-party LLCs and independent contractors. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. But selling a soldier's house while she is overseas, that is not a gray area. Ms. Lee, that is a felony. And if he knew you were deployed, he knew. I said, my father told him. The timeline proves they were rushing to beat my return date. Hart picked up her phone. I'm going to open a file. This is not just a report anymore. It is an investigation. I want you to send me everything you have, every email, every text, and I need to talk to this buyer. Mrs. Caldwell. She is cooperating. I said, good. Hart stood up. Stay in town. Keep your phone on. And do not, I repeat, do not confront Rusk yourself. If he is doing what I think he is doing, he is not working alone. I left the station feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. The gears were turning. But as I drove back to the motel, my mind kept snagging on something Hart had said. He is good at staying in the gray areas. I went back to my room and opened the laptop again. I needed to find the gray area. I started digging into the financial breakdown again. I had looked at the closing disclosure, but I hadn't looked closely at the preliminary title work. I pulled up the title commitment document from the package Mr. Henderson had helped me request. I scanned the list of liens against the property. There was my original mortgage, standard. But there was something else, a second lien. Lien holder, Rapid Bridge Capital, LLC, amount $35,000, date recorded, September 12th. September 12th. That was 3 weeks before the sale closed. That was 2 weeks before Dale sent me the text telling me to call him. My heart started to pound. This wasn't part of the sale. This was a loan taken out against the house before they sold it. They had used the power of attorney to take out a high-interest, short-term bridge loan on my equity, pocketed that cash, and then sold the house to pay off the loan and get the rest of the money. It was a double tap. They had bled the house dry before they even handed over the keys. I checked the disbursement for Rapid Bridge Capital. The address for the lender was a suite in a strip mall in a town 40 minutes away. I grabbed my phone and texted Dale. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Did you take out a loan against the house before you sold it? I watched the screen. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. He was typing. He was deleting. He was panicking. Finally, the response came. We needed operating capital to fix the place up for the sale. It was for repairs. Repairs. The house was in perfect condition when I left, and Erin had said she bought it, as is. There were no repairs. Show me the receipts. I texted back. Silence. The $35,000 hadn't gone to repairs. It had gone into their pockets, or Trent's pockets, or somewhere else. Just then, a message came through from Erin. It was a picture of a crumpled piece of paper. Graham gave me this at the closing. She wrote, he said it was a receipt for the mobile notary service he used to get your signature verified remotely. I found it in the bottom of the welcome packet. I zoomed in on the photo. It was a generic invoice from a company called Verified Mobile Signatures. The address was listed as 1402 Oak Creek Drive, Suite B, Nashville. I opened a map tab on my browser. I typed in the address. The satellite view loaded. It wasn't an office building. It wasn't a business park. It was a self-storage facility. I stared at the screen. A self-storage unit. The official notary service that had validated my signature while I was 7,000 miles away was operating out of a metal box filled with old mattresses and Christmas decorations. This wasn't just Dale being desperate. This wasn't just Trent being greedy. Dale didn't know how to set up a shell company for a notary. Trent wasn't smart enough to structure a bridge loan through a shell LLC, like Rapid Bridge Capital. I looked at the names again. Rapid Bridge Capital, Verified Mobile Signatures, Graham Rusk. The pattern emerged like a hidden image in a puzzle. These weren't independent mistakes. These were tools. My father and brother thought they were the ones pulling the strings. They thought they had used Graham Rusk to solve their problem. But as I looked at the fake address and the predatory loan, the terrifying reality hit me. Dale and Trent weren't the masterminds. They were the bait. Graham Rusk hadn't just helped them sell a house. He had handed them a loaded gun, pointed it at my head, and told them it was a water pistol. He had built a system to strip equity from families in crisis, using their own dysfunction as the cover. I wasn't just fighting my family anymore. I was standing on the edge of a criminal enterprise that used fathers and brothers as disposable pawns. And I was the only one who saw the strings. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interrogation room hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. I was not being interrogated, but Detective Lena Hart had commandeered the room because it was the only quiet place in the station. Ideally, a strategy meeting happens in a war room with maps and satellite imagery. Here, we had a metal table, a few styrofoam cups of lukewarm coffee, and a growing mountain of evidence that smelled like ink and betrayal. Hart slid a manila folder across the table toward me. Her face was grim, the lines around her eyes deeper than they had been yesterday. "We pulled the notary logs," she said, her voice dry. Or rather, we tried to. I opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of the deed's signature page. The notary stamp was a smudge of blue ink, but the name was legible: Patricia Vance. Commission expires 2025. I looked up at Hart. "Does she exist?" "Oh, she exists," Hart said, leaning back and crossing her arms. "But she has been in a memory care facility in Chattanooga for the last 18 months. She surrendered her commission 2 years ago. We called her son. He said her stamp went missing from her home office right before they moved her. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was not just a fake signature. It was identity theft of an elderly woman. They were using a ghost to validate their crimes. So the notarization is void." I said, "It is worse than void." Hart corrected, "It is a fabrication, and since a deed cannot be recorded without a valid notary acknowledgement, the entire recording is fraudulent. But to prove that in a way that sticks, we need to link the physical act of stamping that document to Graham Rusk." She tapped the table with her index finger. "We need the video. I sent a warrant to that storage facility you found, the one listed as the mobile notary address. We are looking for footage of Rusk, your father, or your brother entering or exiting around the date of the signing." "My father," I said, the word tasting like ash. "You think he knew the notary was fake?" Hart looked at me with a pity that I hated. "Madeline, your father signed the deed. He stood in a room or a storage unit and watched someone who was not Patricia Vance stamp that paper. Either he is the most gullible man in Tennessee, or he didn't care who was holding the stamp as long as the check cleared." I stared at the fake stamp. I wanted to believe he was just stupid. I really did. But stupidity has limits. Greed does not. I left the station and drove straight to the office of Noah Klein. He was a civil litigator recommended by the base legal office, a man who specialized in property disputes for service members. His office was small, smelling of old leather and pipe tobacco, a stark contrast to the sterile police station. Noah was a young guy, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He had the energy of a terrier who had just smelled a rat. He had my original enlistment papers spread out on his desk alongside the forged deed. "Look at the loop," Noah said, pointing with a pen. He did not look up when I entered. He was too focused. I walked around the desk to see what he was looking at. On the left was my real signature. On the right was the one Dale had signed as attorney-in-fact, when you make a capital M. Noah explained. You loop the bottom of the first vertical stroke. It is a muscle memory thing, distinctive. He tapped the forged document. Here, the M is sharp, angular. And look at the pressure points. The ink is heavier at the start of the letters. That indicates hesitation. The person signing this wasn't flowing. They were drawing. They were trying to copy a style, but they missed the rhythm. He looked up at me then. This isn't just a misuse of power of attorney. Madeline. Even with a power of attorney, the agent usually signs their own name followed by, as agent for. But look here. He pointed to a specific line on the affidavit of seller. Someone tried to sign your name here, without the agent qualifier. Then they crossed it out and initialed it. It is sloppy. It reeks of panic. It reeks of Trent, I said softly. Noah nodded. Likely. But here's the kicker. Since the notary seal is stolen, this document is a piece of trash. Legally, it has zero weight, but practically, it convinced the county clerk to change the name on the title. We have to file a lis pendens immediately. That puts a suit pending notice on the property title. It freezes everything. No more loans, no more transfers. Do it, I said. Lock it down. My phone buzzed. It was Aaron Caldwell. Can we meet? Miles is freaking out. I met them at a diner on the edge of town. Aaron looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. Her husband, Miles, was a quiet man with the calloused hands of a mechanic. He looked terrified. They sat on one side of the booth, huddled together like refugees. I sat opposite them, my back to the wall, watching the door. Old habits. We got a letter from our mortgage servicer, Miles said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. His hand shook slightly. The first payment was auto-drafted this morning, $3,200. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Ms. Lee, if we don't own this house, we are paying a mortgage on nothing. We emptied our savings for the down payment. If this sale is voided, the bank is going to come after us for the full loan amount immediately because the collateral the house wasn't valid. We will be bankrupt. Aaron gripped his arm. We heard you are working with the police. Graham isn't answering his phone. His email bounced back this morning. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was bitter, but it cleared my head. Graham is gone, I told them. The police went to his office. It is empty. The address was a Dropbox. He has gone to ground. Erin put her head in her hands. Oh my God. We are going to lose everything. No, you are not, I said. They both looked up. I have a plan, I continued. I call it the two-pronged approach. I leaned in. Prong 1. You two are the victims of title fraud. You have title insurance, right? It was mandatory for your mortgage. Miles nodded dumbly. I think so. You do. Noah, my lawyer, is going to draft a joint affidavit with your lawyer, Avery Pike. We are going to present a united front. We prove the notary was fake. We prove the seller me was defrauded. This triggers your title insurance policy. The insurance company is on the hook to make you whole because they insured a bad title. I took a breath. Prong 2. Once the insurance pays off your mortgage, the deed is voided. Ownership reverts to me. You get your money back. I get my house back. But where do you live in the meantime? Aaron asked. I stay in the motel, I said. And you stay in the house. You would let us stay, Miles asked, shocked. I am not going to kick you out onto the street while the lawyers fight. I said, you take care of the place. You pay the utilities. We wait for the insurance check. Erin reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was tight. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, I said, pulling my hand back gently. We still have to catch the people who did this. I left the diner feeling a strange sense of calm. I had secured the perimeter. Aaron and Miles were neutralized as threats and converted into assets. Now, I could focus on the targets. I drove back to the motel. the sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the parking lot. My phone rang. It was Dale. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Dad. The word felt foreign now. I answered. Hello? Dale. Maddie. His voice was a jagged whisper. The police. Why were the police asking questions at the notary office? Why did Mrs. Gable call me saying a detective was asking about my bank accounts? Because you committed a crime, Dad. I said, it was not a crime. He shouted, his voice cracking. It was a necessity. Trent was in trouble. Real trouble. Maddie. You do not understand. These people, they were going to hurt him. Who, I asked. Who was going to hurt him? The loan sharks. Dale sobbed. He owed $40,000 to some guys in Nashville. They threatened to break his legs. Graham said he could fix it. He said if we sold the house quick, we could pay them off and have plenty left over for you. I was trying to save your brother. I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness. So you stole my house to pay a gambling debt. I summarized. I didn't steal it. I was going to pay you back. I still can. We have some of the money left. How much, I asked. How much is left? Dad. Silence. We had to pay Graham his fees, Dale mumbled. And the bridge loan interest, and Trent needed a little to get set up. How much, I repeated. $12,000, he whispered. They had sold a $200,000 asset. They had paid off a $40,000 debt, and somehow only $12,000 was left. Graham Rusk had eaten them alive. You have spent $188,000 of my money in 4 days. I said, please, Dale begged. Stop the police. We can fix this. I will work. Trent will get a job. We will pay you back every month. Just don't put your father in jail. I hung up. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall. My father was begging for mercy. But he was still lying. He wasn't sorry he did it. He was sorry the math didn't work out. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Trent. I opened it. You are a real piece of work, aren't you? Dragging the cops into this? You have a pension. You have the military. You can rebuild. I can't. If I go down for this, I am never getting back up. Hope you are happy being the golden child who stepped on her family's neck. I read it twice. You can rebuild. As if my life, my sacrifice, my service was just a renewable resource for them to harvest whenever they got cold. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. There was a knock on the door. I grabbed the canister of pepper spray I kept on the nightstand and looked through the peephole. It was Noah Klein. He looked excited. I opened the door. I found it, he said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. He threw a file onto the bed. Found what the kill shot, Noah said, grinning. He opened the file and pointed to a document I hadn't looked at in years. It was the original trust agreement I had formed when I bought the house. I knew you had a trust, Noah said, but I didn't realize how specific the language was until I pulled the full recording from the archives. He tapped a paragraph on page 4. Section 4.2. Powers of the trustee. Read it, he said. I read the legal jargon. The trustee shall have the power to sell, convey, or encumber the real property provided. However, that if the primary beneficiary is on active military duty, no transfer of real property shall be valid without the written, notarized consent of the trust protector. Trust protector. I asked. Noah nodded. You appointed a trust protector, a failsafe. Do you remember who I racked my brain? 5 years ago. I was sitting in a JAG office. They asked me to name someone I trusted who wasn't a family member, someone who could veto bad decisions if I was incapacitated. I named Sergeant Major Williams. I whispered, my old mentor. Exactly, Noah said. He stood up, looking triumphant. Dale had a power of attorney for Madeline Lee. But the house is owned by the Madeline Lee Trust, and the trust has a safety lock that requires Sergeant Major Williams to sign off on any sale while you are deployed. He looked at me. Did Sergeant Major Williams sign anything? No. I said, he is retired in Florida. He doesn't even know Dale. Then the deed isn't just voidable, Noah said. It is legally impossible. Dale tried to sell a car using a library card. The moment we present this to a judge, the transaction doesn't just unravel, it vanishes. He paused, his expression turning serious. But here's the thing. Madeline, when we drop this, it proves Dale wasn't just negligent. It proves he ignored the explicit legal structure you set up to protect yourself. It proves malice. He looked at the phone in my hand, and it means Graham Rusk made a fatal error. He checked the title, but he didn't read the trust bylaws. He got sloppy. I looked at the text from Trent. You can rebuild. No. I thought, I don't have to rebuild, because you never actually tore it down. I looked at Noah. File it, I said, and send a copy to Detective Hart. Noah nodded and headed for the door. Oh, and Noah, I called out. He turned back. Make sure the copy you send to my father is delivered by a courier. I want him to have to sign for it. I wanted him to have to use that pen one last time. The knock on my motel room door at 10 o'clock at night was not the sharp, authoritative rap of the police. It was a soft, rhythmic thudding, like a heartbeat that was skipping. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. I opened the door, leaving the security chain engaged. Trent stood in the harsh yellow glow of the hallway lights. He looked like a ghost of the brother I remembered. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark purple bruises of exhaustion. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn on the porch 2 days ago, but now the shirt was stained and untucked. Maddie, he whispered, leaning his forehead against the doorframe. Please, open up. I stared at him through the 3-inch gap. What do you want? Trent. I have nowhere to go, he said, his voice cracking. Dad kicked me out. He said I brought the heat down on him. I have been sleeping in my car. I am hungry. I did not undo the chain. I had seen this movie before. I had seen it when he was 19 and crashed Dale's truck. I had seen it when he was 22 and stole my credit card. It was the penitent Trent phase of the cycle. I am sorry. Maddie, he continued, seeing my hesitation, I messed up. I know I messed up. But I am done. I am done with the gambling. I am done with the schemes. I just need a place to crash for a couple of months. Just until I get a job. Just until I get on my feet. A couple of months. That was always the timeline. Just a couple of months. Just a small loan. Just a little help. I looked at him, and for a split second, the old instinct flared up, the instinct to be the big sister, the protector, the one who fixes the scraped knees and the broken toys. But then I remembered the closing disclosure. I remembered the $40,000 funneled to T. Lee Holdings. I remembered him standing on the porch, drinking beer, telling me I should be thankful. I closed the door. Maddie, he shouted, slapping the wood. Don't do this. I unhooked the chain. Trent's face lit up with relief when he heard the slide of the metal. I opened the door fully, but I did not step aside. I stood in the threshold, blocking the view of the room where my legal war room was spread out on the bed. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a brochure I had picked up at the police station. It was for a state-funded addiction recovery center in Nashville. I held it out to him. What is this? He asked, staring at the glossy paper. It is a bed, I said. It is 3 meals a day, and it is a program that will help you stop destroying everyone around you. He looked at the brochure, then looked up at me with a sneer that wiped away the penitent act in an instant. I don't need rehab, he spat. I need a sister. I need a bed. Maddie, you have this room. You have money. You always have money. I do not have money. Trent, I said calmly, you spent it, remember? He crumpled the brochure in his fist and threw it at my feet. You think you are so high and mighty. Don't you, he hissed, stepping into my personal space. The smell of stale alcohol and unwashed skin was overpowering. You think because you put on a uniform and ran away to Japan that you are better than us. The golden child. The hero. He poked a finger toward my chest. I slapped his hand away. You don't know what it is like here, he shouted. Dad is old. The house was falling apart. I was trying to keep things floating while you were off playing soldier, and now you come back. And instead of helping, you bring the cops, you bring lawyers, you're trying to put your own family in jail. I watched him unravel. It was ugly, but it was necessary. I needed to see this. I needed to be reminded that the brother I loved was buried under layers of entitlement and resentment. I am not trying to put you in jail. Trent, I said, my voice low and steady, You put yourself there when you forged my signature. Oh, stop with the legal crap, he yelled. It is just paper, we are blood. Blood is supposed to forgive. I looked him in the eye. Forgiveness is for mistakes. Trent, what you did was an execution. You tried to erase me. I kicked the crumpled brochure toward his sneaker. I am not winning. I told him, you think this is a victory lap for me? I am living in a motel. My credit is ruined. My home is a crime scene. I am not winning. I am just refusing to drown for you anymore. He stared at me, his chest heaving. The rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by a sudden, terrifying realization that the old buttons didn't work. The vending machine of my empathy was out of order. Go to the center, or sleep in your car, I said. But do not come back here, and do not go near the house. Aaron has a restraining order ready to file if you step onto the lawn. I slammed the door before he could answer. I threw the deadbolt. I put the chain back on. Then I leaned against the door and slid down to the floor, listening to him kick the wall once, scream an obscenity, and stomp away down the hall. I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left for Trent. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Dale. Meet me at the park, he said. The one by the old middle school. Please, just 10 minutes. He sounded different than Trent. He didn't sound angry. He sounded hollow. I met him at noon. The park was empty, save for a few mothers pushing strollers. Dale was sitting on a rusted bench, staring at the empty baseball diamond where he used to coach my Little League team a lifetime ago. He looked smaller, the bluster. The head of the household arrogance was gone. He was wearing a windbreaker that was too big for him, his shoulders hunched inward. I sat on the other end of the bench, leaving 2 feet of space between us. Did you talk to Trent? He asked, not looking at me. He came by last night. I said, I gave him the number for the recovery center. Dale nodded slowly. He won't go. He never goes. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the wind blow dead leaves across the infield dirt. I lied to you, Dale said softly. I know. I said, you lied about everything. No, I mean I lied about why. He turned to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and watery. It wasn't just Trent's debt. Maddie, I frowned. What do you mean I owed money too? He confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. The pension, it hasn't been enough for years. The inflation. The medical bills for my back, I started using those credit cards you told me to cut up. I maxed them out. Then I took out a payday loan to pay the minimums. Then another. He looked down at his hands, watching his fingers intertwine. I was drowning. Maddie, just like him. And then Graham Rusk showed up. He was a friend of Trent's. He sat at the kitchen table and he made it sound so easy. He said the market was hot. He said we could sell the house, pay off Trent's sharks, pay off my loans, and still have enough to put a down payment on a condo for me and keep the rest for you. He looked at me with a desperate earnestness. He promised he could turn it around in a week. He said you wouldn't even mind because we were saving the family. I thought I was fixing it. I listened to him, and the tragedy of it settled over me like a heavy fog. He wasn't a villain in a movie. He was a weak, desperate old man who had let a predator into the henhouse because he was too proud to ask his daughter for help. You could have told me. I said, I would have sent money. I always send money. I know, he cried. And that is why I couldn't tell you I'm the father. Madeline, I'm supposed to take care of you. I couldn't ask you to bail me out again. I was ashamed. So instead of shame, you chose theft. I said. He flinched as if I had slapped him. I didn't think of it as theft, he whispered. I thought it was a loan from the future. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. The pathetic nature of his excuse was making me sick. You call it sacrifice, Dad. You tell yourself you did it to save Trent, or to save your dignity, but that is a lie. I looked down at him. You did it because it was the easy way out. You hid behind the idea of family so you wouldn't have to face your own mistakes. You sold my life because you were too cowardly to fix yours. Maddie, please, he wept. I am not stopping the lawsuit. Dad, I said, I can't. The train has left the station. The trust was violated. The notary was fake. The law doesn't care about your credit card bills. I turned to walk away, then stopped. And one more thing. If you really want to be a father, stop protecting Trent. Tell the truth. Tell the detective exactly where the money went. Because if you lie to protect him again, you are going to prison with him. I left him weeping on the bench, a small figure in a big, empty park. I drove to the house. I needed to check on the tenants. Erin was waiting for me on the porch. The change in her was remarkable. 2 days ago, she had been a shaking mess in a bathrobe. Today, she was dressed in jeans and a blazer, holding a stack of files. She looked like a woman going to war. "Miles is at work," she said. "But we talked. We are not moving." "Good," I said. She handed me a coffee. I called the title insurance company myself. She said, "I told them if they drag their feet, I am going to the state insurance commissioner. I told them their underwriter approved a transaction based on a forgery and a stolen stamp." They sounded terrified. "They should be," I said, and I talked to Avery, my lawyer. She continued, "He wants to depose Graham Rusk. But since Graham is missing, he wants to depose your father and brother immediately. Next week, under oath." She looked at me, her eyes hard. "I am not a vindictive person, Madeline. But that man, Rusk, he looked me in the eye and told me I was helping a nice family. He smiled at me while he stole my life savings. I want to see him in handcuffs. I want that too." I said. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Noah Klein, my lawyer. "Get over here. Avery is on the line. We have a development." I drove to Noah's office. The air inside was electric. Noah was pacing behind his desk. Avery Pike, a silver-haired man with the presence of a senator, was on the speakerphone. "Madeline." Avery's voice filled the room. "We have gone over the trust documents and the notary evidence. It is a slam dunk for the civil side. The judge will likely grant a summary judgment to void the deed based on the trust protector clause alone." I let out a breath. "So I get the house back?" "Yes," Avery said. "But the criminal side that is trickier. To get a fraud conviction, specifically against Rusk and the organization behind him, we need to prove conspiracy. We need to prove your father and brother weren't just dupes, but active participants who knew the notary was fake." Or, Noah interrupted, "We need them to flip on Rusk. We need them to testify that Rusk engineered the fake notary, but if they testify, they implicate themselves." I said, "Exactly." Avery said, "It is the prisoner's dilemma. If they stay silent, they go down for the forgery. If they talk, they might get a deal, but they admit to the fraud." Noah stopped pacing and looked at me. "But there is a variable we didn't expect." "What variable?" I asked. "Someone contacted my office an hour ago," Avery said. "They heard about the filing. They saw the name Graham Rusk on the docket." "Who?" I asked. "She wouldn't give her name over the phone." Avery said, "But she said she used to work for Rusk. She said she knows how the verified mobile signatures scam works. And she said she has a hard drive, a whistleblower." I whispered, "She wants to meet you." Noah said, "Not the lawyers. You? Tonight? Why me?" "Because she says she knows your brother." Noah said, "She says Trent didn't just stumble into Rusk's office. She says Trent has been on their payroll for 6 months. The room went silent. "On their payroll," I repeated. "She says Trent wasn't the victim of a loan shark." "Madeline?" Noah said gently. "She says he was a recruiter." I felt the blood drain from my face. Trent wasn't just a desperate gambler who made a mistake. If this woman was right, Trent was a hunter. And I was just the biggest prey he had ever brought in. "Set it up," I said. "I want to meet her. She is meeting you at the Waffle House next to your motel." Noah said, "Midnight. Come alone." I walked out of the office into the cooling evening air. The image of Trent crying at my door, playing the victim, played over and over in my head. I need a sister. I need a bed. He didn't need a bed. He needed a hideout. I got into my car. The sadness regarding my father was still there, a dull ache. But the feeling I had for my brother had changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something colder. It was the clinical detachment of a soldier realizing the enemy is inside the wire. And at midnight, I was going to find out exactly how deep the tunnel went. The Waffle House at midnight was a tableau of exhausted humanity. Truck drivers hunched over coffee, a group of teenagers laughed too loudly in a corner booth, and the smell of grease and syrup was a heavy, comforting blanket. I sat in a booth near the back, my back to the wall, watching the door. At 12:05, she walked in. She didn't look like a whistleblower from a spy movie. She looked like a tired administrative assistant. She was wearing a raincoat over pajamas, clutching a large purse. Her hair was dyed a fierce shade of red, but the roots were showing, and her eyes darted around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped bird. I waved slightly. She saw me, hesitated, then walked over and slid into the booth opposite me. "Are you Madeline?" she whispered. "I am. You must be the one who called Avery Pike." She nodded, pulling a napkin from the dispenser and shredding it nervously. "My name is Sloan. Sloan Rusk." I froze. "Rusk Graham is my ex-husband," she said quickly. "Or soon-to-be ex. We are separated, but I still did his books until last week, until I saw your name." She looked up at me, her eyes wet. I saw the news. Madeline, not on TV, but on the grapevine. The police raiding the storage unit, the list pendants filed on the house. Graham packed a bag and left 3 days ago. He told me to burn the hard drives. "And did you?" I asked. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a rugged, black external hard drive. She placed it on the table between us like it was a bomb. "I made a copy," she said, "because I am not going to prison for him. Not again." I looked at the drive. "What is on this?" "Everything," Sloan said. "The client list, the notary logs, the real ones, not the fake ones he shows the county, the email chains." She took a shaky breath. "Graham has a system. He calls it distressed asset liberation. He scours public records for homes with high equity and owners who are detached, elderly people in nursing homes, people in rehab, and soldiers deployed overseas." She looked at me apologetically. "He has a subscription to a database that tracks military deployments. He cross-references it with property tax records. He looks for homes owned by single service members. He targeted me," I said, feeling a cold fury rising. "Yes," she said, "but he can't just steal a house. He needs an inside man. He needs a family member with a power of attorney or a willingness to forge one. Someone desperate. Someone greedy. So he found my father." I said. Sloan shook her head. She looked down at the shredded napkin. "No, Madeline, he didn't find your father." She looked up, and the look in her eyes broke my heart. "Your brother found Graham." The noise of the diner seemed to fade away. What I whispered. "Trent," she said. "Trent Lee. He came to Graham 6 months ago. He wasn't a victim. Madeline, he was a bird dog. A bird dog." "It is a term in the industry," she explained. "Someone who sniffs out deals. Trent owed money to some bad people. Yes, but he told Graham he had a solution. He told Graham his sister was deploying and had a house with 100 grand in equity sitting untouched. He told Graham he could get your father to sign anything if they just applied enough pressure." I stared at her, the image of Trent crying at my motel door, claiming he was just trying to save the family, shattered. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had sold me out. He had pitched me as a business opportunity. He brought the deal to Graham. Sloan continued. He negotiated a finder's fee. That $40,000 that went to T. Lee Holdings. That wasn't just debt payoff. That was his commission. He split the profit with Graham. And my father, I asked. Sloan shrugged. Trent played him like a fiddle. He told your dad the loan sharks were going to kill him. He created the panic. Your dad. He is guilty of being stupid. Maybe. But Trent is the architect. I sat back in the booth. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just theft. It was a fratricide for profit. "Will you testify?" I asked. Sloan nodded. "If I get immunity, if they promise not to charge me as an accessory." I picked up the hard drive. "I will call Detective Hart right now." An hour later, we were in an unmarked police car in the parking lot of the Waffle House. Detective Hart was in the front seat, looking at the contents of the hard drive on her laptop. Sloan was in the back next to me. shivering despite the heat. "This is it," Hart murmured, scrolling through a spreadsheet. "There are dozens of them. Operation Okinawa. The nursing home flip. This guy is a monster." She turned to Sloane. "You did the right thing. Mrs. Rusk, we are going to put you in a hotel tonight. Secure location. Tomorrow. The DA is going to want to talk to you." Hart looked at me. "And you?" "Madeline. This changes everything. It is not just fraud anymore. It is a RICO case. Racketeering. Conspiracy. Your brother is looking at 10 to 15 years. Minimum." I nodded. I felt numb. Do what you have to do. The next few days were a blur of legal preparation. I sat in Noah Klein's office, drafting my affidavit. I had to detail every interaction, every phone call, every lie. I had to explain the trust structure, the trust protector clause that Sergeant Major Williams had unknowingly enforced by simply existing. Aaron and Miles came in to give their statements. They looked stronger now. They described how Graham had bullied them, how he had dismissed their request for a lawyer as insulting to the family. They described the fake mobile notary receipt. We were building a fortress of evidence, but the enemy was getting desperate. On the night before the preliminary hearing, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Trent. I stared at the screen. I hadn't blocked him because Detective Hart told me to keep the line open for evidence. "I know you talked to Sloane." The text read, "I know she gave you the drive. You think you have me cornered?" I didn't reply. A second text came through. "If you pull that trigger, Madeline, you don't just kill me, you kill Dad. You think you know everything, you don't know half of what Dad signed. If I go down, I am taking him with me. He is not innocent, and I have the paper to prove it." I stared at the words. I have the paper to prove it. What did that mean? Had Dale signed something else? Had Trent tricked him into being a co-conspirator on other deals? I felt a wave of nausea. Trent was holding our father hostage. He was using Dale as a human shield to force me to back down. I called Detective Hart. "He is threatening to implicate Dale," I said, reading her the text. "Let him try." Hart said, "We have Sloane. We have the drive. We know Trent was the recruiter. If Dale cooperates, we can paint him as a victim of manipulation. But Madeline, you need to be prepared. If Trent has evidence that your father knowingly participated in other frauds, we can't save him." I hung up and looked out the window of my motel room. The neon sign of the Waffle House flickered in the distance. I realized then that the tragedy wasn't over. The house could be saved, the money could be recovered, but my family? It was already dead. The only question left was how many bodies would be left on the floor when the smoke cleared. I texted Trent back. One word. Try. I put the phone down. I was done negotiating with terrorists, even if they shared my last name. The conference room at the downtown law offices of Pike and Associates was designed to intimidate. The table was a slab of polished mahogany that looked long enough to land a fighter jet on. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that smelled of dust and billable hours. It was what the lawyers called neutral ground. But the air inside felt pressurized, like the cabin of a plane in a nosedive. On one side of the table sat the victims. Myself, Aaron Caldwell, Miles Caldwell, my lawyer, Noah Klein, and their lawyer, Avery Pike. Detective Lena Hart sat at the head of the table, not officially leading the proceeding, but present as an observer with the power to arrest anyone who confessed to a felony between sips of water. On the other side sat the wreckage of my family. Dale slumped in his chair, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 days. He wore a suit that was 2 sizes too big, a relic from a funeral he had attended years ago. Beside him, Trent was twitching. He wore a button-down shirt that was too tight, and he kept tapping his foot against the table leg. A rhythmic, annoying thud that echoed in the silence. They had a court-appointed public defender, a young woman who looked like she had just realized she was standing on the tracks of a freight train. Avery Pike stood up. He did not need notes. He had the calm, predatory grace of a shark entering a school of tuna. "We are here to determine the validity of the deed transfer regarding 402 Maple Street," Avery began, his voice baritone and smooth. "But frankly, there is nothing to determine. He slid a single piece of paper across the mahogany. "This is the affidavit from the Notary Commission Office. The stamp used on the deed belongs to Patricia Vance. Ms. Vance has been in a memory care unit for 2 years. She does not own a mobile notary business. She does not know Dale Lee, and she certainly did not witness a signature in a storage unit on September 25th. Dale flinched as if Avery had thrown a rock at him. Avery continued, pacing slowly behind Aaron's chair. "Since the notarization is a forgery, the deed is void ab initio. From the beginning, it is a legal nullity. The house never belonged to my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. And it certainly never belonged to the shell company that Graham Rusk used to funnel the money." Avery turned his gaze to Dale. "But we are not just here to unwind a sale. We are here to ask why the proceeds of this fraudulent sale were distributed in such a peculiar manner." He pointed a finger at Trent. $40,000 to T. Lee Holdings, $35,000 to Rapid Bridge Capital, $12,000 in transaction fees to Mr. Rusk. The public defender cleared her throat. "My clients are asserting their Fifth Amendment rights regarding the financial specifics." "No," Dale blurted out. Everyone turned to him. The public defender put a hand on his arm, whispering urgently, but Dale shook her off. He looked desperate, sweating under the fluorescent lights. "It was me," Dale said, his voice trembling. "It was all me. I stole the stamp. I found it online. I tricked Trent. I told him it was all legal. He did not know. He just wanted to help his dad." I watched him lie. It was pathetic. It was the instinct of a parent trying to throw himself on a grenade that had already exploded. He was trying to take the fall for the forgery to save Trent from prison. Noah Klein, my lawyer, leaned forward. "Mr. Lee," Noah said gently, "we have video surveillance from the storage facility. We have the logbooks. We know you were there, but we also know you did not organize this alone. You do not know how to clone a notary stamp. You do not know Graham Rusk." "I did." Dale insisted, tears welling in his eyes. "I am the bad guy. Punish me. Just leave my boy out of it." I looked at Trent. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at the table, his jaw clenched. He wasn't grateful for the sacrifice. He was annoyed that Dale was doing it badly. Detective Hart spoke up for the first time. Her voice was cool, cutting through Dale's hysterics. "Mr. Lee, lying to a federal investigator is a separate crime, and we know you are lying because we have the hard drive from Sloan Rusk." The color drained from Trent's face. He stopped tapping his foot. "We know Trent brought the deal to Graham," Hart said, looking directly at my brother. "We know about the finder's fee." Trent's head snapped up. "That was a consulting fee I consulted on the property. I knew the owner." "You are the brother of the owner," Avery corrected, "and you are the son of the agent. That is not consulting. That is conspiracy. Where's the money?" "Trent," I asked. The room went silent. It was the first time I had spoken. I looked at him across the table. $40,000, I said, plus the $35,000 from the bridge loan. That is $75,000 that vanished in 4 days. "Where is it?" Trent sneered. "You would not understand. It is invested. Invested in what Miles Caldwell asked." His voice was shaking. "That was our down payment. That was our life savings. It is in a high-yield leverage protocol," Trent shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Alpha Node Strategies. It creates passive income through algorithmic trading. I was going to double it in a month and pay everyone back." I stared at him. Alpha Node. I had heard of it. It was a crypto MLM scheme that had been flagged by the Federal Trade Commission months ago. It wasn't an investment. It was a black hole. "You put $75,000 into a Ponzi scheme?" I asked, my voice flat. "It is not a scheme," Trent yelled. "It is the future. You are just too stupid to see it. I was going to be rich. I was going to buy the house back and you would never have known. And then the realization hit me. It hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I thought about the text he had sent me. I have the paper to prove it. I will take him with me." I looked at Dale. He wasn't just protecting Trent because he loved him. He was protecting Trent because he was afraid. "Trent," I said softly. How did you open an account with AlphaNode? They require a minimum deposit of $50,000 for the tier you are talking about, and they require a guarantor with a credit score over 700. Trent froze. His eyes darted to Dale. Your credit score is 400. I said, you have a bankruptcy on your record. You could not open that account. I looked at Dale. Did you sign for the investment account too? Dad? Dale put his head in his hands. He didn't answer. No, I whispered. He didn't sign it. I looked back at Trent. You used his identity, didn't you? Trent's face went pale. You stole Dad's identity to open the trading account. I said, the pieces falling into place. Just like you forged my name on the deed. You forged his name on the investment documents. That is the leverage you have. That is why you threatened to take him down with you. If you go to prison for the house, the investigation will uncover the investment account, and since Dad's name is on it, he is liable for the tax evasion and the fraud unless he presses charges against you for identity theft, and you knew he would never do that. I looked at my father. He was weeping silently. He was a man held hostage by his own son, forced to cover up a crime to prevent being implicated in another crime he didn't even commit. You monster, I said to Trent. Trent stood up. I did it for us. I did it to get us out of the hole. You did it for yourself. Erin Caldwell stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Erin was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she stood tall. She pointed a finger at Trent. We are not rich people, she said, her voice breaking. Miles worked 6 days a week. We ate ramen for 3 years to save that money. We trusted you. We trusted your father. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I am scared to death right now, she said. I am scared we will lose everything, but I am not a thief, and I am not a liar. She looked at Dale. I don't want your house if it was stolen. Mr. Lee, I want the truth. Because if you don't tell the truth, you are not saving your son. You are helping him destroy another family. Dale looked up at Erin. He looked at her wet eyes, her shaking hands. He saw the damage he had done to a stranger who had done nothing but trust him. Dale took a deep breath. He looked at Trent. Sit down. Trent, Dale said. His voice was quiet, but it had a steel in it I hadn't heard in years. Dad, don't say anything. Trent warned. Sit down. Dale shouted. Trent sat. Dale looked at Detective Hart. I did not know about the investment account, he said. I thought the money went to pay off loan sharks. If he put it in some internet scheme, I did not know. He turned to me, and I did not know the notary was fake until we got to the storage unit. Graham met us there. He said it was standard procedure. I chose not to ask questions. I chose to look away. He looked at me. Pleading for absolution I could not give. I just wanted the pressure to stop. Maddie, I just wanted peace. I looked at him. There is no peace in a lie. Dad, I said. I stood up and gathered my files. I am not killing you. I said to him, the truth will do that if you keep trying to hide it. But today, for the first time, you actually acted like a father. You told the truth. Keep doing that. The session ended. The tension in the room did not dissipate. It just changed shape. It shifted from a battle of secrets to a waiting game for the axe to fall. Noah Klein stayed behind to file the motion for summary judgment. Detective Hart escorted Trent and Dale out. Trent looked terrified now, his bluster gone as the reality of the AlphaNode revelations sank in. He wasn't just a fraudster. He was an identity thief who had targeted his own father. I drove back to the motel. It was raining again. A cold, gray drizzle that matched my mood. The judge had set the hearing for the final ruling on the deed for 48 hours from now. Avery was confident the transaction would be unwound. Erin and Miles would get their insurance payout. I would get the title back, but the criminal charges were still looming, and my family was shattered beyond repair. I got to my room and threw my keys on the dresser. I was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Then I saw it. A manila envelope had been slid under my door. I froze. I reached for the pepper spray in my bag. My heart hammering, I checked the hallway. Empty. I picked up the envelope. It was plain, unmarked. I ripped it open. Inside was a single photocopied document. It looked old. The paper had crease marks, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. It was a contract, a simple, one-page agreement. Partnership agreement regarding asset liquidation. Date, May 12th. I stared at the date. May. I hadn't even deployed in May. I was still in the States, preparing. I hadn't given Dale the power of attorney refresher yet. The emergency with the loan sharks hadn't happened yet. I read the terms. Parties Graham Rusk and Trent Lee. Purpose identification and acquisition of distressed equity in the property located at 402 Maple Street. Terms: Trent Lee agrees to facilitate access to title documents and secure necessary family authorization in exchange for 50% of net proceeds. I looked at the bottom. There was Graham's signature, and there was Trent's signature. And there was a handwritten note in the margin. In Trent's distinctive scrawl, target moving overseas in July. Will initiate pressure campaign on father in August. I dropped the paper. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. Everything Dale had said about the loan sharks, about the sudden debt, about the panic, it was all manufactured. There were no loan sharks. Trent hadn't gotten into trouble and needed bail money. He had planned this. He had planned it months ago. He knew I was deploying. He knew Dale was weak. He had orchestrated the debt crisis to force Dale into a corner so he could trigger the sale he had already promised to Graham. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had gaslit our father into a nervous breakdown to use him as a tool. My brother wasn't a screw-up. He was a sociopath. I picked up the paper again. My hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't from shock. It was from the cold, hard realization of what I had to do. I had told Dale I wouldn't kill him. But this piece of paper, this was the weapon that would bury Trent forever, and I was going to be the one to pull the trigger. The courtroom was silent, but it was the kind of silence that screams. It was the air inside a pressure cooker right before the valve blows. We were seated in the civil division of the Pine Hollow County Courthouse, a room with wood paneling that had absorbed a century of lies and apologies. On the bench sat Judge Harrigan, a woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for having zero patience for family drama. My lawyer, Noah Klein, stood up. He did not pace. He did not shout. He simply adjusted his tie and placed a single document on the judge's podium. "Your Honor," Noah began, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "We have spent the last 3 days discussing fraud, forgery, and deceit, and while those elements are present in abundance, the legal reality of this case is actually quite boring." He turned to look at Dale and Trent. They were sitting at the defense table, looking like two men waiting for a firing squad. The property at 402 Maple Street was never eligible for sale. Noah continued, "The deed transfer attempted by Mr. Dale Lee was not just unauthorized, it was legally impossible. The property is held in the Madeline Lee Revocable Trust. Section 4, Paragraph 2 of that trust explicitly states that while the primary beneficiary is deployed on active military orders, no transfer of real property may occur without the notarized consent of the trust protector." Noah pointed to me. Ms. Lee was in Okinawa. The trust protector, Sergeant Major Williams, was in Florida. Neither of them signed a thing, therefore. Dale Lee did not sell a house. He sold a fiction. He attempted to convey a title he did not possess the keys to unlock. Judge Harrigan looked at the document. She flipped the page. She looked over her glasses at the defense table. "Is this accurate?" she asked the public defender. The defender stood up, looking defeated. "The trust language is clear. Your Honor, we cannot dispute the structure." Judge Harrigan nodded. Then, as a matter of property law, the deed recorded on September 25th is void ab initio. It is a nullity. The title reverts immediately to the trust. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I stood on that porch. The house was mine. The legal knot had been cut, but we weren't done. Detective Lena Hart stood up from the gallery and walked through the swinging gate. She was holding the manila envelope I had received the night before, the one containing the partnership agreement between Trent and Graham Rusk. "Your Honor," Hart said, "while the civil matter is resolved, The state moves to enter evidence regarding the criminal culpability of the parties involved. She handed the agreement to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. We have established that the notarization was forged using a stolen stamp, Hart said, her voice turning hard. We have testimony from Sloan Rusk regarding the systematic targeting of deployed service members, but until last night, the defense argued that Trent Lee was a desperate young man acting under duress from loan sharks. Hart turned and looked directly at Trent. This document, dated May 12th, proves otherwise. It is a profit-sharing agreement signed by Trent Lee and Graham Rusk 2 months before Madeline Lee deployed. It outlines a strategy to harass and manipulate Dale Lee into liquidating the asset. Dale let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. He turned to look at Trent. May Dale whispered, "You told me the loan sharks came in August." Trent didn't look at him. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. There were no loan sharks. "Mr. Lee," Hart said gently to my father, "your son invented a crisis to force you to sell your daughter's home so he could collect a 50% commission from a predator." The courtroom erupted in low murmurs. Dale put his head on the table and wept. It wasn't the crying of a man who got caught. It was the sound of a father realizing his son had been cannibalizing him for months. Judge Harrigan banged her gavel. "Order," she commanded. She looked at the papers. She looked at the weeping father. She looked at the stoic, sociopathic son. "The court rules as follows," she declared. "The deed is canceled. The ownership of 402 Maple Street is restored to the Madeline Lee Revocable Trust." She turned to Aaron and Miles Caldwell. "The court orders the title insurance carrier to immediately disperse the full purchase price of $200,000 to Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. Furthermore, the court orders a restitution judgment against Trent Lee and Graham Rusk for all legal fees and moving expenses incurred by the victims." Then she turned her eyes to my family. "Dale Lee, stand up." My father stood. He looked small, shrunken. "You committed forgery," Judge Harrigan said. "You stole an identity. You betrayed a fiduciary duty to your daughter. However, it appears you were also the victim of significant psychological manipulation." She paused. "I am sentencing you to 5 years of probation, but I am adding a condition. You are to attend a mandatory financial responsibility course and a court-ordered family counseling program. You are also financially liable for the $12,000 you personally spent from the proceeds. You will pay your daughter back. Mr. Lee, even if it takes the rest of your life." Dale nodded, unable to speak. "Trent Lee, stand up." Trent stood. He didn't slouch this time. He looked like a cornered rat. "This court finds the evidence of conspiracy and elder abuse compelling," the judge said, her voice dropping an octave. "You didn't just steal a house, you engineered a tragedy. You are remanded to custody pending a full criminal trial for racketeering, grand larceny, and identity theft. Bail is denied." 2 officers moved in behind Trent. They pulled his arms back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the room. "Wait," Trent shouted, struggling. "I have money I can pay." "The Alphanode account." "The money is gone." "Trent," Hart said from the side, "the SEC shut down Alphanode this morning. It is zero." Trent screamed as they dragged him out. It was a raw, ugly sound. Dale didn't look up. He just covered his ears. "And Graham Rusk?" the judge asked. Hart checked her phone. "Atlanta police just picked him up at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, Your Honor. He was trying to board a flight to Belize. We have the extradition paperwork ready." The gavel banged one last time. Case closed. The room exhaled. It was over. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the Tennessee afternoon. The air smelled of rain and exhaust fumes. But to me, it smelled like freedom. Aaron and Miles were waiting for me by the steps. Aaron looked exhausted but relieved. "So, it is really over?" she asked. "It is over," I said. "You will get your check in a few days." Aaron looked at me. "You could have destroyed us. Madeline, you could have evicted us on day 1 and let us fight the bank alone. You didn't." I looked at the 2 of them. They were good people who had walked into a trap meant for me. We were all targets. I said, I just happened to be the one with the ammunition. Aaron stepped forward and hugged me. It was awkward, brief, but genuine. "Thank you for not making me a casualty," she whispered. I watched them walk away, hand in hand, ready to start over. They would find another house, a safe one. Then I felt a presence behind me. Dale was standing there. He was holding a plastic bag with his personal effects the court had released him, but he looked like a prisoner who had been kicked out of jail. "Maddie," he said. I turned to face him. I didn't feel the anger anymore. The anger had burned out, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. "I am sorry," he said. "I know that word doesn't mean anything." "No," I said, "it doesn't." He looked at his shoes. "Where do I go?" "The house." "You can't stay at the house, Dad," I said. He looked up, startled. "But I have nowhere else." "I know," I said. "But you sold that house. You stood on that porch and told me I was homeless. You broke the seal." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a card for a short-term rental efficiency near the industrial park. I had paid the first month's rent. "You can stay here for 30 days. I said. "You have your pension. You have probation. You have to figure the rest out." "Maddie, please," he begged. "I am your father." I looked him in the eye. "No," I said gently. "You were my father. Now, you are just a man who owes me $12,000. I turned and walked to my rental car. I didn't look back. I knew he was watching me, standing alone on the courthouse steps, realizing that family wasn't a magic word that erased consequences. I drove to Maple Street. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway. The sold sign was gone. Aaron and Miles had already moved their boxes out, leaving the house empty. I walked up the gravel path. The crunch of my boots sounded different this time. It wasn't the sound of a weary soldier returning to an ambush. It was the sound of a commander inspecting a secured position. I stepped onto the porch, the spot where Dale had leaned, the spot where Trent had sat drinking beer. It was just wood now. Their ghosts were gone. I took the key out of my pocket. It was the original key, the one I had carried with me to Okinawa and back. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying click. The door swung open. The house was silent. The air inside was stale, smelling faintly of the cleaning supplies Erin had used before she left. I stepped across the threshold and closed the door behind me. I locked it. I leaned my back against the wood and slid down until I was sitting on the floor of the empty foyer. Dale had asked me why I laughed that day on the porch. He had asked me why I smiled when he told me I was homeless. He thought I was crazy. He thought I was in shock. But he didn't understand. I looked around at the walls I had painted, the stairs I had sanded, the home I had bought with money earned in deserts and jungles. I closed my eyes and finally finished the sentence I had started 3 days ago, because that house really was a fortress. It was a vault. It was a legal and emotional panic room designed by a 26-year-old woman who knew, deep down, that the people supposed to protect her were the ones she needed protection from. It was property that had been locked, not just by a trust, but by my own survival instinct. I had built a wall that they couldn't climb, a door they couldn't force, and a life they couldn't sell. I wasn't homeless. I was the only one who knew where the true foundation lay. I opened my eyes. The house was empty. My family was gone. And for the first time in my life, I was completely, beautifully safe. Thank you so much for listening to Madeline's story. It was a long journey from the barracks of Okinawa to that final courtroom showdown, and I really hope you enjoyed the ride. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, working out, or maybe relaxing at home? Drop a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of Trent's betrayal. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, smashing that like button, and hitting the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring more of these dramatic, real-life revenge stories to you. Stay safe, stay smart, and never sign a paper without reading the fine print.